NBC's Meet the Press recently became the center of intense scrutiny following a high-profile interview conducted by host Kristen Welker. In what was anticipated as a hard-hitting journalistic exchange, the segment quickly spiraled into a heated controversy. Rather than standing as a firm interrogation, the interview raised concerns across the media landscape and among the public for the way it unfolded, particularly the tone, timing, and substance of the questions asked and the responses permitted to go unchallenged. The broadcast was expected to serve as a definitive moment of journalistic clarity, an opportunity to confront controversial political positions and challenge statements with precision. Instead, it opened a floodgate of criticism from viewers and commentators alike who believed the host failed to adequately push back on several inflammatory or misleading claims. Questions that should have invited deeper analysis or correction appeared to drift by without confrontation, leading some to label the event a missed opportunity to assert the media's role as a check on power. This disappointment was amplified by the very platform that aired it. NBC, long known for its legacy in investigative journalism, found itself accused of facilitating a form of media normalization, allowing controversial talking points to be aired with minimal scrutiny. Critics questioned the editorial decision to air the full conversation in such a format, asking whether producers and executives had properly evaluated the consequences of granting such an uncritical space. Instead of pressing for specifics or drawing out contradictions, the flow of the dialogue gave the impression of an unfiltered monologue more than an interview. The public response was swift. Analysts across political lines, although often with differing motivations, expressed frustration with how the segment was handled. Those wary of political extremism viewed the program as negligent, suggesting that by not interrupting or fact-checking in real time, the network enabled the spread of harmful or misleading narratives. Meanwhile, critics from other ideological perspectives cheered the broadcast as an overdue move toward fairness, highlighting how rarely such figures are given a chance to speak at length without interruption on mainstream platforms. Amid this backdrop, the host herself faced the brunt of the backlash. Known for a generally poised demeanor and incisive interviewing style, her approach in this instance drew accusations of being either overly deferential or tactically cautious. In some corners of the media world, there was sympathy for the position. She was put in, moderating a high-stakes conversation with an unpredictable speaker while trying to maintain composure and journalistic integrity. But even those sympathetic voices admitted that the interview lacked the rigor and resilience expected of such a platform. Further compounding the controversy was the aftermath. Editorial reactions, statements from media watchdogs, and think pieces by journalism scholars dissected what had gone wrong. Many zeroed in on the network's preparation, or lack thereof. Were producers and research teams prepared with real-time fact-checking? Was the format designed to allow for serious interrogation, or was it, by its very structure, destined to favor surface-level discussion? The answers were not encouraging to those who hold the press in high regard. The segment also sparked internal discussions within the journalism industry. At a time when trust in media institutions remains fragile, the episode highlighted the precarious tightrope journalists walk, balancing access to powerful figures against the imperative to confront misinformation. This balance, some argued, tipped too far in favor of access in this case. Granting a platform without effectively using it to probe or hold accountable doesn't simply constitute a missed chance. It risks eroding the public's trust further. Moreover, this incident did not occur in a vacuum. It followed a broader trend, where established media institutions grapple with how to handle figures who operate outside traditional political norms. The challenges of fact-checking live interviews, managing incendiary rhetoric, and maintaining decorum are not new. But in this instance, the stakes felt higher, and the execution fell short. There is an expectation that prime-time interviews, especially on respected programs, will offer more than just airtime. They are supposed to offer clarity, challenge, and accountability. The reaction among viewers was sharply polarized. Some praised the calm and professional tone, interpreting it as a refusal to engage in combative theatrics. Others saw it as complicity through silence. This division reflected a broader crisis in the relationship between media and audience, where trust is increasingly determined not just by what is said, but how aggressively it is said, and by whom. In essence, the uproar over this interview reflects deeper anxieties about the current state of journalism. In an era where every word is dissected and every segment archived for endless rewatching, the standard for excellence in political interviews is higher than ever. And when it isn't met, as many argue happened here, the repercussions reverberate far beyond the newsroom. Karoline Leavitt recently found herself at the center of a media firestorm following an intense and ultimately cut short appearance on CNN. The interview, conducted by Casey Hunt, was expected to be a routine political exchange ahead of a major, upcoming debate. However, what began as a standard media appearance quickly escalated into a contentious and memorable moment that captured national attention and underscored the widening divide between the press and political spokespeople. At ID, the heart of the exchange was a dispute over the perceived impartiality of debate moderators. Leavitt, serving in a senior communications role, opened the interview by openly questioning the credibility of the journalists slated to moderate an important national event. She cited past coverage and statements that, in her view, disqualified them from being objective facilitators of political discourse. Rather than sidestep the issue or defer to party lines, she leaned in, stating in unambiguous terms that there were concerns about fairness and bias. Hunt, aiming to steer the conversation back to the intended topic, repeatedly attempted to redirect the discussion. But Leavitt held her ground, continuing to assert that the moderators lacked neutrality. The tension escalated quickly, with the interviewer warning the guest that the line of questioning was inappropriate for the segment's purpose. Still, Leavitt persisted. She framed her remarks as a defense of transparency and accountability in political journalism, challenging the notion that certain media figures should be immune to critique. The tension reached a breaking point when Hunt abruptly ended the interview mid-sentence, cutting off the feed and moving on with the broadcast. The moment was jarring. Viewers saw a live interview terminated not due to time constraints, but seemingly in direct response to the subject matter being discussed. Within minutes, the clip circulated online, prompting a wave of reactions from both sides of the political spectrum. Supporters of Leavitt argued that she was making a valid point about journalistic bias, a topic that has resonated with a growing segment of the public disillusioned with traditional media. They praised her for standing firm and refusing to bow to pressure, viewing the interruption as further evidence of the very bias she was attempting to expose. Her critics, on the other hand, saw the incident as grandstanding, accusing her of hijacking a media platform to score political points rather than engage in meaningful dialogue. The incident sparked widespread commentary across cable news panels, opinion columns, and social media platforms. Media watchdog groups issued statements, some defending Hunt's decision to end the interview in order to preserve the integrity of the broadcast, others arguing that shutting down dissenting views, particularly those aimed at the media itself, was counterproductive and harmful to open discourse. Even longtime political analysts were split, with some pointing to the breakdown as a failure of media strategy and others seeing it as a calculated maneuver to stoke division. This clash is emblematic of a broader trend in political communication: the increasing frequency of confrontations between spokespeople and journalists. As political figures and their teams become more media-savvy and strategic, interviews that once followed predictable formats now frequently become battlegrounds for messaging control. The rise of digital platforms has only heightened this dynamic, with each side aware that a single clip can be replayed, remixed, and used to fuel narratives for days. What made this particular episode stand out was the way it encapsulated the friction between traditional media institutions and those who seek to challenge them. For years, questions about the objectivity of major news outlets have simmered beneath the surface. Leavitt's decision to bring that debate into a live, high-stakes television moment forced the issue into public view in a way that couldn't be ignored or reframed by post-interview analysis. The immediacy of live TV amplified both the message and the consequences. Following the segment, Leavitt addressed the incident through various platforms, doubling down on her remarks and framing the early cutoff as proof of her claims. Her allies rallied behind her, turning the moment into a campaign flashpoint, while her detractors labeled it an orchestrated disruption. The network, meanwhile, stood by its host, emphasizing editorial standards and the need to maintain order during live broadcasts. The broader implications are significant. Interviews like this one demonstrate how fragile and high-stakes live political media has become. The balance between allowing robust dialogue and maintaining editorial control has never been more difficult to strike. For spokespeople like Leavitt, who are trained not just to respond but to reframe, the modern media landscape offers both an opportunity and a challenge, and for journalists, it raises uncomfortable questions about when to draw the line and what happens when they do. Karoline Leavitt has emerged as one of the most assertive and recognizable voices in modern political communication. Her media presence, marked by sharp rebuttals, confident delivery, and an unflinching approach to contentious topics, has made her both a lightning rod for criticism and a symbol of strength for supporters who feel unrepresented by traditional media narratives. Across a range of interviews and public appearances, she has demonstrated a talent for turning interviews into controlled performances where the message she wants to convey remains the focal point, regardless of the format or questions posed. One particularly illustrative moment took place during a segment on a major morning news program, where Leavitt was invited to discuss the administration's policy requiring federal employees to return to in-office work. The subject on the surface seemed to be a relatively neutral one, a shift in workplace expectations that many organizations across the country have had to reckon with post-pandemic. However, what followed was anything but routine. As the interviewer raised concerns about the potential loss of experienced government professionals, Leavitt remained composed but firm. She emphasized the importance of restoring pre-pandemic standards and framed the return to office directive as a move toward accountability and efficiency in public service. Her message was clear. Federal employees, like many in the private sector, needed to return to traditional work structures in order to deliver results for the American people. What stood out during this exchange was not just her defense of the policy, but her rhetorical control over the conversation. Rather than becoming defensive or sidestepping difficult questions, she leaned in, articulating the administration's stance in a way that deflected criticism and put the onus back on those questioning the change. She challenged the framing of the issue, asking whether resistance to returning to the office was a matter of policy concern or merely political posturing from opponents unwilling to adapt to changing expectations. This approach has become a hallmark of Leavitt's media style. She rarely allows herself to be steered off message, even when facing rapid-fire questions or hostile interviewers. In fact, moments of tension often seem to galvanize her, turning potential ambushes into platforms for projecting strength. Her critics accuse her of deflection and talking in circles, but her supporters see something else entirely: confidence, control, and clarity. To them, she is a spokesperson who refuses to apologize for taking up space or challenging the narratives that often dominate major news cycles. Her assertiveness has not gone unnoticed by political commentators, many of whom have remarked on her effectiveness in shaping the tone of interviews. She employs a blend of strategic repetition, emotional emphasis, and policy reference points that keep her audience engaged while signaling authority. Even when interrupted or challenged, she manages to bring the conversation back to her core message, whether about administrative priorities, media bias, or policy outcomes. Part of her success lies in her awareness of the broader media ecosystem. In an age when interview clips are instantly circulated on social platforms, Leavitt clearly understands the value of viral moments. She tailors her delivery not just for the studio audience or the anchor behind the desk, but for the millions of potential viewers who will encounter the exchange later in the form of memes, reels, or short video segments. Her language is concise, charged, and built for repeatability. She doesn't just answer questions, she frames the conversation. This media-savvy style hasn't come without consequences. Leavitt has become a divisive figure, drawing admiration from some quarters and harsh criticism from others. Accusations of grandstanding and partisanship often follow her more controversial interviews. Yet she seems undeterred by this backlash, pressing forward with the same confrontational energy that has become her signature. Rather than backing away from the spotlight during tough segments, she embraces it, using every moment as an opportunity to push her narrative further into the public consciousness. In a political landscape increasingly driven by media engagement, figures like Leavitt represent a new breed of spokesperson, articulate, aggressive, and aware that public opinion is often shaped more by optics and sound bites than by policy detail. She operates at the intersection of politics and media performance, aware that in today's environment, mastering the stage is as crucial as mastering the facts. Her presence across various platforms continues to generate strong reactions, precisely because she challenges expectations of how political communication should look and sound. Whether she's sparring with cable news anchors or defending policies under fire, her ability to stay composed and on message has made her one of the most discussed media figures in recent cycles. For her audience, this isn't just about delivery, it's about conviction, and Leavitt's delivery makes it unmistakably clear where she stands. The recent sequence of exchanges between Karoline Leavitt and members of the national media has reignited a deeper conversation about the relationship between the press and political figures. These encounters, while often brief in runtime, have had an outsized impact on public discourse. They serve as flashpoints, drawing attention not only to what was said during the interviews, but also to how it was said, how the media responded, and what the aftermath reveals about the broader dynamics of trust and power in the modern information landscape. Leavitt's media appearances are not just performances or reactive moments. They represent deliberate confrontations with long-standing institutions of journalism. In doing so, she forces the press into an uncomfortable position. The expectation for journalists has long been to act as moderators of political truth, to ask the right questions, challenge inconsistencies, and ultimately provide clarity for the public. Yet, in the current climate, those very institutions face mounting skepticism. More and more, members of the public are questioning whether media figures operate with genuine neutrality or whether they bring entrenched biases to the table. That skepticism has created fertile ground for public figures, like Leavitt, who do not hesitate to call out perceived partiality or editorial slant in real time. This defiance isn't incidental. It's a strategic positioning that appeals to a growing segment of the population that views mainstream journalism as compromised or out of touch. By flipping the script during interviews and interrogating the questioner, Leavitt transforms what might have been a standard media hit into something more visceral and performative. The dynamic shifts, with the guest appearing to seize control of the platform rather than submit to it. In turn, the reactions from media outlets often reinforce the divisions. When interviews are cut short, or when journalists express visible discomfort, those moments are quickly reframed by Leavitt's supporters as evidence of a double standard. The act of silencing or walking away becomes a powerful symbol, not of journalistic control, but of its limitations. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Confrontation begets controversy, controversy begets coverage, and coverage amplifies the original message beyond what a traditional soundbite could achieve. Observers from across the ideological spectrum have taken note. Media scholars, political strategists, and cultural commentators have all weighed in on what these moments signify. Some argue that the breakdown in dialogue is symptomatic of a larger failure of media institutions to adapt to a new era of political communication. In an environment where everyone is their own broadcaster and information is increasingly decentralized, the idea that a network anchor can control the message may be more illusion than reality. Others, however, lament the erosion of respectful, fact-based dialogue, warning that these televised clashes contribute to a growing sense of cynicism and disengagement. What's undeniable is the shift in public expectations. Audiences no longer simply look to news programs for information. They look for alignment, for affirmation, or for confrontation. Leavitt's media interactions deliver all three, depending on the viewer's perspective. Her style, deliberately pointed and often combative, appeals to those who feel that traditional media has failed to ask the tough questions or has asked the wrong ones altogether. By turning her interviews into public reckonings with the institution itself, she elevates the stakes far beyond the original topic of discussion. This phenomenon isn't unique to one spokesperson or one network. It's part of a broader realignment in political media relations. Figures like Leavitt are emblematic of a post-gatekeeper media world. where the authority once held by major networks is no longer taken as a given. She treats each interview not as an obligation but as a tactical opportunity, an arena in which to project strength, cast doubt on the medium itself, and speak directly to the audience over the heads of the hosts. These patterns have profound implications for how political information is exchanged, evaluated, and internalized by the public. As the divide between media institutions and a significant portion of the public grows, interactions like Leavitt's are likely to become more common, more heated, and more influential. What was once a shared civic space, an interview designed to illuminate, now resembles more of a battleground, with each side attempting to score points, control the narrative, and come out looking victorious. At the core of all this is a fundamental tension: journalism's claim to objectivity versus the lived perception of bias. Leavitt, by refusing to accept that objectivity as a given, invites the audience to question it, to challenge it, and in many cases, to reject it altogether. That act of rejection resonates powerfully in an era of declining institutional trust, where truth itself often feels contested and fluid. The result is a shifting landscape where the interview is no longer just about policy or politics. It's about power, credibility, and who gets the last word. The extraordinary story of a young girl achieving a perfect score on the Mensa IQ test does more than highlight one individual's brilliance. It symbolizes a much broader and more hopeful message about the future of human potential. It invites us to reimagine what is possible when talent is recognized early and nurtured with care, and it challenges outdated assumptions about age, intelligence, and achievement. Moments like these are not just celebrations of exceptional individuals. They are opportunities to reflect on the environments and values that allow such exceptionalism to flourish. In every corner of the world, there are young minds capable of greatness, waiting to be discovered, supported, and empowered. This story serves as a reminder that intelligence comes in many forms and often reveals itself when we least expect it. It encourages educators to be attentive to the hidden talents in their classrooms, inspires parents to nurture curiosity at home, and calls on communities to create spaces where all children have access to the tools and resources they need to thrive. At the same time, it's important to remember that intelligence alone is not enough. Success, whether in science, the arts, or any field, depends not just on how smart someone is, but on how they apply their gifts. Qualities like perseverance, emotional resilience, creativity, and the ability to collaborate are just as important as IQ. That's why, even as we marvel at high test scores and exceptional academic milestones, we must also emphasize the development of the whole person. Character, passion, empathy, and grit, these are the traits that transform potential into lasting impact. This story also shines a spotlight on the importance of equity in education. For every gifted child whose abilities are recognized and supported, there are many more whose talents go unnoticed due to systemic barriers or lack of access. If we are to truly unlock the potential of future generations, we must ensure that every child, regardless of background, has the opportunity to learn, grow, and be challenged in ways that reflect their unique abilities. Ultimately, stories like this serve as both inspiration and challenge. They show what's possible, but they also ask us to do more, to look beyond numbers, nurture every kind of intelligence, and believe that extraordinary potential exists in many places, not just the most obvious ones. They remind us that while brilliance may begin with raw talent, it reaches its full expression through opportunity, support, and a vision for what's possible. This young girl's journey is still unfolding, and her future, like the futures of countless other gifted young people, depends on what we do today to support, encourage, and believe in the minds of tomorrow.